Hello and welcome to yesterday's Airlines. In this video I'm going to take a look at the difference between NG models standard releases and NG Lite, the new sub-brand of NG models. Now, this is the first time that we've really had an opportunity to do this because in September NG announced a couple of NG Lite 737 MAX 8s, and those releases have just had their photos come out. And so we can compare those to the same releases that were made as NG standard models a couple of years ago. And hopefully that'll give a good idea of what the difference is between an NG standard release and what you're going to get when you buy an NG Lite model. Now, I was going to write this originally just for the website, yesterdaysairlines.com, and in fact I have written a blog piece on this, so check that out, but it covers the same material as this video. I thought that since the last NG Lite video I did quite well, that people probably on YouTube would be interested in seeing and learning more about NG Lite on this platform too. So that's why I'm going to do this video as well as publish on the website. But check out yesterdaysairlines.com because I do publish a lot of material there and it's not always the same as on the YouTube channel. Likewise, chuck a like on the video if you enjoy this content and subscribe to the channel because I do publish stuff on this YouTube channel pretty regularly, and check me out at Instagram on @YesterAirlines and Facebook too, because I'm active on Instagram and Facebook quite a bit as well. But thanks very much for that. Let's get on and check out the difference between these two NG Lite Maxes and the original NG releases. Now, if you haven't already and you're interested, don't forget to check out my previous video on NG Lite, which went through and explained the concept and my thoughts on that and how that related to the 747-100, which is up till now been the only NG Lite release that has been made. At the time I was a little sceptical because it wasn't clear whether that 747 release as NG Lite was done entirely because they'd slightly messed up the 747 mould, or whether it was a real concept that NG had come up with. But it's clear now that with three models announced, this pair of Maxes and a Qatar Retro 777, that NG Lite is a real concept that NG want to run with. And the big selling point of NG Lite in comparison to the standard models is simply the price. These are retailing a lot cheaper than a standard NG release or a Gemini Jets release. And I had a look around some of the bigger retailers in the States and the UK, and these prices seem pretty standard. You can buy in the US one of these NG Lite Maxes for about $34.95. That's about $10 or $11 cheaper than you can get an NG standard release of 737 MAX in the States, and it's about $10 or $11 cheaper than you can get a Gemini Jets MAX as well, frankly. Now in the UK the price difference was even larger. These NG Lite releases have been sold for £28.95, which, as anyone who shops in the UK knows, is a lot cheaper than a standard release. Typically you're buying an NG Max or a Gemini Jets Max for £42.95, so that's a massive price difference of about £14. So that is a substantial price difference, makes these a lot more affordable, and you know, though it doesn't necessarily impact me dramatically, I imagine for a lot of younger collectors that price difference is something which is quite seductive and, you know, something which is pretty useful to have in the marketplace because, you know, the price of 400 scale models has gone up pretty dramatically in the last 5 or 6 years, and they are becoming quite unaffordable. So the juxtaposition though obviously is that the reason that they're cheaper is because they are light, i.e. they are simpler. They are not the same as an NG standard model. So as I said, these two models, these two Southwest Retro Maxes, give an opportunity to actually compare the difference between an NG standard release and NG Lite. So the two models that we have here represent the Herbert D. Kelleher Retro N871HK and the Canyon Blue Retro N872CB. Now those were the two first Max releases that NG ever put out back in January and February 2023. So that was a while ago. And it's worth pointing out that the colours for the original Herbert D. Kelleher release that NG put out weren't enormously accurate. I did review that model at yesterdaysNLs.com at the time, and one of the things that I pointed out when I did review it was that the colours weren't really accurate. They'd pretty much gone for the real desert gold colours of the original scheme that Southwest wore, as opposed to the desert gold, which is really quite golden, which this retro wears, because it's not really a representation of the original livery at all. It's really a kind of a golden version of the original scheme. So there is that difference that's obvious between the new NG Lite version and the original, but that doesn't really play into the NG Lite, NG Standard conversation. So I'm not going to get focused too much on the colours. What I am interested in is what is the difference between an NG Standard and an NG Lite model in general. So what I've done is I've simply taken NG's original photographs of the original model and put them side by side with the NG Lite version. And straight away, there's, aside from the colour of the Herbert D. Kelleher one, there's obvious differences between the two. But I have to say that when you first look at these, they both look like excellent models, and the new NG Lite ones don't necessarily stand out as being dramatically inferior to the older ones. However, they do have a slightly retro-y feel to them outside of the subject matter, in the sense that the most obvious difference between the NG Lite models and the standard releases is that the NG Lite versions clearly are not equipped with aerials or Wi-Fi domes. So that is a clear cost-saving measure on the construction part. Take off the aerials, take off the Wi-Fi domes, and you're saving yourself not just the materials, but also the manpower to actually attach and fix those. I have to say that potentially also means you've got less QC issues as well. But at the same time, the aerials on NG models are aspects that I quite like, and the domes are quite substantial on these Maxes. So they're missing, maybe that's something that bothers you, maybe it's not. I don't know whether it's something that would impact my purchasing decision here. The other thing that is clearly different between these is the level of the printing, the level of the detail printing. And that can be seen across the models. And I'll take a look more closely at some of those print differences in a minute. The third thing, which is obvious too, is the undercarriage. It looks a little simpler, not in terms of its construction with these Maxes, but in terms of the finish. You can see that the original Max releases had coloured hubcaps, and these ones do not. You could also see that the gear doors had printing on, and these ones do not. So, in a sense, they've simplified some of that detailing on the undercarriage. There had been talk from NG that they might not have rolling gear, but these ones do look like they've got the same standard gear that the standard NG Maxes have. So in this case, I'm pretty sure that these do roll and they've got rolling undercarriage, but they don't have quite the same level of print and colour finishing. Now, I've marked up one of these diagrams to illustrate some of the obvious different areas, and you can see clearly the things I've pointed out already, the hubcap different colours and the lack of detail printing on the nose gear doors, the lack of aerials and the Wi-Fi domes. But if we want to look in more detail at the print differences, then you can see them clearly as well. And some of those print differences are things that don't immediately stand out, but if you're looking at the model very closely, then you would notice they were missing. And they're the sort of things that have been typically added in the last 6 or 7 or 8 or maybe 10 years in 400 scale anyway. So if you've got a model from, say, 2012 or before, they're probably the sort of thing that wouldn't be on the model anyway. So again, how much this bothers you depends really on how closely you're looking at the release. Now, if you look more closely at the nose area of the Herbert D. Kelleher release here, again ignoring the colour difference, which isn't related to the light or standard, you can see some of these things more clearly. So one of the obvious things that's missing is the radome printing, the lines that make up the radome. Also, you can see that the blocked out window, which is just behind the L1 door here, that is also missing. Some of these small entry points and maintenance doors and little detailed print elements beneath the window lining on the belly. They are also missing. The extra print that has been added typically nowadays on the engine nacelles, mainly on the underside, all that line work is also absent. And you can see also that the doors have been slightly simplified and they're missing the hinge work too. So these are the kind of things which have been missed off the print. But as I say, the print itself still looks pretty good, and the things that are remaining still have plenty of detail on them. The emergency exits and the doors themselves, the cockpit windows, the printing there still is the same quality. And it kind of gives the model overall an appearance of maybe like an Aero Classics release. If you collect Aero Classics, you'll know their printing detailing isn't as strong as other brands, partly because the owner doesn't like it to be that strong. He doesn't like redome lines. He doesn't like aerials. So this kind of almost looks a bit Aero Classic-y, but I have to say that NG's ability to finish and print is substantially better than the sort of thing you're likely to get most of the time from AC. So the model overall, and when you look at these pictures of the finished models here, they look really solid. They look really good. But the three big differences for me are, one, they lack the aerials and the domes. Two, they have slightly simpler undercarriage. And three, they're missing some of the finer detailed printing like redome lines, door hinges, line paneling on the engines, that kind of thing. But otherwise, what you're getting is the same model at a substantial discount. So those are the differences that I see with these. Okay, so I hope that makes it clearer what you're getting when you're going to be buying an NG Lite model as opposed to an NG standard model. I don't really know what to think about this myself. I don't think these models are necessarily aimed at collectors like me. They don't bother me, and if they produce models as NG Lite that they're not producing as standard, it probably wouldn't stop me buying them. And it'll be interesting to see whether they do that or whether they just keep on re-releasing versions they've already made as standard models. So that'll be interesting. I don't know what they're going to do. Personally, I'd probably get the standard release, but it doesn't bother me that much. And if it was an older aircraft type that didn't have things like Wi-Fi domes, then again, it probably wouldn't bother me that much at all. But I think the differences are reasonably clear. And the question is, do collectors care that much about that level of print detailing? Do they care that much about aerials? Or do they care more about how much money is leaving their wallet? And it'll be interesting to see what people think about that and whether there is a market for these. But I would have thought that in developing markets, places like India or Indonesia, where perhaps people don't have as much disposable income, and for younger collectors, that these NG Lite models are a good gateway into the scale, because 400 has been getting pretty damn expensive in recent time, and that must be off-putting for certainly younger collectors, I would have thought. Okay guys, well I hope you've had a good look at these models and can see the differences and have enjoyed the video, but that's it from me for now. So thanks very much for watching. I'll see you next time. Bye.